In my boy's gaze, I caught that hollow stare mirroring the one my great-grandpa wore just prior to attempting to string up his sister. At that instant, it hit me. Our family's dark legacy had resurfaced. Hello, everyone. I'm Grandma Helen, 72 years young, broadcasting straight from my snug cottage in Laredo, Texas, perched along the Mexico frontier. This arid breeze truly shines when the temperatures climb, doesn't it? Right now, I plan to reveal a narrative I've tucked away in my soul for more than 3 decades, one involving passion, heartache, and the way fate can craft snares that blindside us entirely. Yet prior to embarking on this challenging path, may I request a heartfelt gesture. Thumbs up this clip. It's effortless. Also, share below which region of the States you're viewing from. I'd adore hearing your name. I treasure poring over each of your replies. They ease the isolation in this vast dwelling, now occupied solely by myself and echoes of yesterday. I entered the world in 1953 within a humble yet neat dwelling in Laredo's Cerro district. My folks, Robert and Maria Lopez, toiled tirelessly. Father worked as a woodworker, fashioning pieces of cabinetry that stood as genuine masterpieces, adorned with graceful arches and detailed etchings seldom found in modern times. Mother freelanced as a tailor, specializing in festive gowns. Our home brimmed with vivid textiles, fine edges, and bows from her craft. Those early days brought me pure delight, truly. I romped along the roads with local youngsters and headed to classes gripping the hand of my elder sibling, Josephine. We lacked extravagances, yet plates stayed full and warmth overflowed. The affection that filled every corner. Even after grueling labor left him weary, Dad carved out moments for evening tales. Mother sang gently through her stitching hours, infusing the space with glow and vitality. The lone gloom hanging over us arose from murmurs surrounding my dad's grandfather, Antonio. He departed this life well before my birth, yet elders shared hushed accounts of him whenever they assumed we young ones weren't nearby. They described his psychological troubles, nights without rest stretching into days, rambling without sense, perceiving figures that vanished. Once he sought to lynch his own kin, convinced a serpent had masqueraded as her. It lingers in the lineage. My grandma would softly confide to Mom, "Blessings, it bypassed one line. It evaded your father and you." I absorbed those chilling yarns as a child, sending chills racing along my back, yet convinced they belonged to bygone eras, untouched by my world. How utterly mistaken I proved, oh Lord. Still, we'll proceed gradually. It's an extensive chronicle, and I intend to recount each nuance. I completed my studies at age 18 during the early 1970s. Such a vibrant period. You envisioned possibilities, nurtured faith in tomorrow amid the land's various struggles. I secured employment as an administrative aide at a financial services office in the urban core. Earnings were modest, but I supported the family while sparing coins for treats like a dash of color for my lips or updated slippers now and then. It was there, in that workplace, that I encountered Felipe. Goodness, Felipe. Uttering his name after so long still stirs a unique rhythm in my chest. He served as a financial specialist, newly minted from university, and shifted from Dallas for the position. Sporting a solid frame, ebony tresses, and most memorably, those amber-hued orbs that shimmered like burnished gold beneath ideal rays. A captivating figure, mind you, not solely as my eventual partner. Truly, he commanded attention. Our debut interaction lingers sharp as if recent. He strode in burdened by a teetering mound of records, scarcely managing the load. Amid arranging records, I lifted my eyes to this fumbling youth battling to prevent a tumble. I dashed forward to assist. Fingers grazed momentarily, and there it sparked, a surge akin to thunder. That invigorating pulse surging everywhere upon linking with a remarkable soul. "Appreciate it greatly," he beamed, a grin I'd recognize as his signature. Felipe, the arriving bookkeeper. "Helen," I responded, warmth rising to my cheeks, pleased to join us. Precisely 3 weeks elapsed before he summoned the boldness to propose an outing. 21 days of corridor glances, fabricated reasons to approach my station for patron details, and mutual mugs in the compact lounge. Upon finally steeling himself, he proposed a cinema visit for Love Story, that tender romance. Affirmation came swift from me, naturally. We wooed for 2 years, adhering to the decorum of our era. He'd fetch me from the residence, converse with my parents in the parlor, guide me on garden paths for chilled delights, showings of worthy flicks, and town gatherings where we'd move to rhythms, always honoring the chaste gap that guardians endorsed, as you might imagine. A charming pursuit, free of haste. Felipe was he stood out from the rest of the guys I'd known back then, kind-hearted, thoughtful, and always courteous. He never lost his temper. Even during our arguments, he'd handle it with a steady demeanor, discussing things calmly, sharing his perspective, and making me feel truly cherished. He'd surprise me with bouquets just because, and he never forgot the small things I shared in passing. He proudly presented me to folks as the loveliest and smartest lady in all of Laredo. That year, 1975, he proposed. It happened on a Sunday following our meal at my folks' place. He requested a private chat with my dad, and they shut themselves in the tiny space that doubled as his woodworking area for nearly an hour. Emerging, Dad's eyes were misty, though he grinned widely. Felipe approached me, dropped to one knee amid the family gathering, and drew a modest box from his pocket containing a lovely, unpretentious ring. "Helen," he murmured, his tone quivering slightly, "will you wed me and turn me into the luckiest fellow alive?" No need to spell it out. I agreed on the spot, didn't I? The family erupted in cheers right away. Mom teared up while my cousins dove into debates over the gown, the dessert, and the blooms. 6 months on, we tied the knot in a modest service at Laredo's First United Methodist Church. Cash was tight, yet our kin pitched in to craft a memorable celebration. Mom and my aunt dedicated weeks to whipping up treats and starters. Dad personally constructed the cake stand from prime timber he sourced. Pals rotated shifts to deck out the sanctuary and the community room. My gown lacked extravagance, but crafted with endless affection by Mom and my madrina, it struck me as the finest ever. Fine lacework, minuscule pearls hand-stitched across the top, and a subtle yet graceful trail. Gazing into the mirror that afternoon, I hardly knew the radiant young woman gazing back. She evoked the fairy tale royals from the tales Dad spun in my childhood. Felipe awaited at the front, dashing in his Soul Navy suit, perfectly ironed and fitted for the day. Our gazes locked, and I spotted moisture in his eyes. He admitted afterward, "Seeing you glide down the path, Helen, I felt my chest might explode from sheer bliss." We launched our shared life in a compact yet welcoming flat close to the city center. 2 sleeping quarters, a sitting area, a cooking space, and a snug washroom. It was basic, but to our eyes, it rivaled any grand estate. We furnished it plainly, some pieces hand-built by Dad, others financed bit by bit. I added geranium pots to the sills, crafted vibrant drapes, and fussed over every nook with devotion. Felipe kept his job at the accountancy office, and post-wedding, I began crafting pastries and confections on commission right from our home. Baking had always been my passion, and before long, my muffins, creamy tarts, and festive layer cakes gained a following locally. It wasn't as reliable as his office pay, but it eased the expenses and let me tend to our budding home, since building a family was our heartfelt goal, you see, to welcome a little one. Right from our early wedded days, we'd chat about it endlessly. Their personalities, potential names, our parenting style. Felipe hoped for a son to toss a ball with and guide on weekend angling trips. I envisioned a daughter to adorn with frills and lace, passing down our cherished recipes. Yet at heart, we just yearned for a robust infant, gender aside. Those initial marital months brimmed with delight. exploring one another, adapting to cohabitation, plotting ahead, rousing beside him each dawn, brewing coffee side by side before his commute, and welcoming him with a smooch upon his return at dusk. Such straightforward bliss, yet so fulfilling that at times a twinge of fear crept in, dread that this perfection couldn't endure. Evenings in bed, we'd muse on tomorrow. Felipe aspired to launch his independent bookkeeping business someday. I pondered expanding my baking venture, perhaps into a cozy bakery. Naturally, family figured large in our visions. At least 3 little ones, he'd declare, drawing me near. Our home alive with kids' giggles and romps. 3. I'd feign surprise. Let's tackle 1 first, then discuss. We'd chuckle, embrace, and persist through cycle after cycle in pursuit of that vision. A full year of efforts yielded nothing, sparking concern. What could be amiss? We consulted physicians, underwent exams, and all checked out fine. Give it time and endurance, they'd encourage. Youth and vitality are on your side. It'll come. And come it did. Come June 1977, I discovered my pregnancy at last. Lord above, that was an unforgettable morning. I'd tested at the health center early and devoted the day to scheming the perfect reveal for Felipe. He prepared his beloved meal, a hearty pot roast alongside creamy mashed potatoes. True to his Texas roots, I laid out the table using our cherished lace cloth reserved for those rare special nights. I even arranged some fresh blooms in a vase. When he returned from the office, the sight of all that care caught him off guard. "Is today our anniversary?" he inquired, a hint of concern in his voice, and then I realized I'd overlooked mentioning it. "No, darling," I answered, struggling to suppress my grin, though there is something worth celebrating. Over the meal, we chatted about his workday and everyday matters. I was on the verge of exploding with excitement, yet I waited for the perfect instant. As we reached the sweet course, his cherished chocolate pudding, I set a little wrapped gift on the table. "What's this?" he wondered, eyes wide with curiosity. "Take a look inside," I urged, my pulse racing wildly. Nestled within was a delicate set of knitted baby booties, crafted that same afternoon with help from our neighbor. Felipe gazed at the tiny shoes, then shifted his look to me and back again. For a second, confusion lingered on his face. Suddenly, realization dawned, and his eyes grew large, brimming with moisture. I nodded through my own tears. "Yes, Felipe, we're expecting a child. I'm 2 months along." He sprang from his seat, nearly toppling it in the process. Rounding the table, he enveloped me in a fierce embrace, hoisting me up and twirling me across our modest living space. Laughter mingled with sobs as we clung together, scarcely able to grasp that our long-held wish was at last unfolding. That evening, as we rested in bed, Felipe rested his palm gently on my unchanged abdomen and lingered there quietly, as though sensing the life already stirring within. "I'll be the greatest dad ever," he vowed, his words thick with feeling. "I'll share every bit of knowledge I have. I'll never leave his side. I'll cherish this little one with everything I've got." "I believe you," I murmured, stroking his locks. "You're already the finest spouse imaginable. You'll make an incredible parent." The gestation period passed smoothly, thankfully. Nausea hit me in the mornings during the initial trimester, but it never stopped me from handling household tasks or fulfilling my baking commitments. Felipe grew even more devoted if such a thing were possible. He'd arrive home bearing the fruits I suddenly yearned for. He'd soothe my aching feet after a long day when they puffed up. He'd dive into volumes on infant care and growth with such fervor that I'd tease him about being the one truly carrying the load. By the 5th month, we learned it was a son on the way. Felipe's delight overflowed. He dashed out to share the news across the neighborhood. "His name will be Michael Robert," he declared to all ears. "He'll follow in my footsteps as an accountant or become a physician-engineer, whatever path calls to him." We outfitted the nursery with endless affection. The once plain walls turned a soft azure, adorned with fluffy white clouds sketched by my artistic cousin over a full Sunday. The cradle came as a present from my folks. Dad insisted on assembling it himself from the finest timber available. Mom and her sisters rotated shifts, sewing the linens, bedding, nappies, quilts, and minuscule outfits I'd store in the bureau, tracing each item and picturing the cherubic features that would soon inhabit them. The final stretch brimmed with eager suspense, my midsection swelling, the kicks intensifying as if he were impatient to greet the outside. Each evening, Felipe conversed with my bump, recounting his routine, humming soft melodies and offering pledges. "I'll introduce you to angling once you're sturdy enough," he'd pledge. "I'll show you soccer, cycling, the ways of true character." Mike entered the world on a chilly January dawn in 1978, following nearly 12 hours of exertion. A plump, pink newborn topped with a shock of dark curls that even startled the medical staff. "Seems like he arrived all groomed," the nurse quipped as she handed him to me initially. An overwhelming affection surged through me, one I'd never imagined. It was like my soul expanded to hold such boundless warmth. Felipe at my side wept freely, his gaze locked on our precious bundle. "He's flawless," he breathed, tracing the infant's soft skin with a tender touch. "Thank you, sweetheart, for this miracle you've bestowed." We returned home after 3 days, stepping into a fresh chapter. Endless, wakeful hours, soiled linens to swap, feeds to mix, wails to interpret. Yet each hurdle brought waves of happiness that overshadowed any fatigue. Mike's debut grin, his inaugural tiny molar, the moment he flipped onto his side unaided. We marked every step like a monumental triumph. Felipe embodied the parent he'd sworn to become. Despite exhaustion from his job, he'd head directly to the bassinet upon arriving. Lifting our boy, he'd frolic with him, assist in tub time, and spin yarns. Come Saturdays and Sundays, he'd strap Mike into the pram and stroll the community, beaming as he introduced his child to every familiar face, every acquaintance he encountered on his path. "See how clever he is," he'd remark. "He recognizes our voices already. He can reach for the rattle by himself." Oh, my darlings, reflecting on those initial years now, it all felt utterly idyllic. We enjoyed a lovely household, a joyful union, and a robust boy who was developing both physically and mentally. Who could have foreseen that fate held such a harsh twist for us? How was I to realize that the very lineage flowing through my great-grandfather Antonio, the subject of those hushed tales, also coursed through my son's body? But I'm jumping too far forward, tangled up in the tale. These recollections can muddle my thoughts at times. You see, one instant I'm reliving the aroma of fresh baked bread from home, the sound of my young son's chuckles bouncing off the walls. The next, I'm fast-forwarding to witness it all collapse like a fragile beach structure. My sweethearts, if you've followed along this far in the narrative, kindly leave a note in the comments saying, "I'm here with you." That way, I can sense there's an audience out there supporting me through this tough path. Coming up, I'll share about the prosperous times in our family life before the dark clouds began to gather. Stick around. Absolutely, Mike's early days were pure bliss, my loves. Those opening years delivered such immense joy that even after all these years, decades on, shutting my eyes brings back the faint baby fragrance, those sweet peals of laughter filling the rooms, and those inquisitive young gazes exploring everything around. Right from infancy, my boy displayed remarkable smarts. By age 1, he was uttering distinct words: Mom, Dad, water. Whereas his peers were merely cooing incoherently. At 2, he crafted full phrases that amazed his nursery staff. "Grandma Helen, this kid's a genius," they'd tell me during pickup. "He speaks like a tiny grown-up." Felipe swelled with such pride it almost popped his buttons. He splurged on a Super 8 movie camera, paid off in 12 easy installments, a real extravagance given our finances then, just to capture each milestone in our boy's progress. Come weekends, he'd convert the den into a screening spot, beaming homemade films onto the blank wall. Mike's initial wobbles, extinguishing candles on his cake, frolicking in the playground. "This lad's destined for greatness," he'd declare, his gaze alight with hope. "He combines his mom's brains with his dad's drive. He'll become a physician or perhaps a leader in government." By Mike's third birthday in 1981, we realized our place was too cramped. The cozy flat that once felt grand now couldn't contain our energetic child. He required room to dash about, investigate, and thrive. Fortunately, Felipe's venture thrived. He'd risen to supervisor at the bookkeeping company, and my pastry commissions had garnered steady customers, letting me add substantially to our household funds. We scrimped for months and managed a deposit on a modest yet roomy home in Vista Hills. It featured a rear yard with a bountiful citrus tree, 3 sleeping quarters, one for us, one for Mike, and a spare we envisioned as a nursery for the next little one we hoped for. Out front sat a modest veranda where I arranged containers of blooming impatiens and greenery, crafting my serene retreat. Our relocation aligned perfectly with Mike's preschool debut. We selected Little People Preschool thoughtfully. It boasted a stellar name and lay merely 4 streets away. For his inaugural morning, I prepared him meticulously. His outfit was crisply ironed. His snack pack held packed bites, fresh produce, and a hidden treat muffin, while his locks were neatly styled with a youthful scented pomade. "School's gonna be wonderful, sweetheart," I assured him as we strolled holding hands. "You'll find plenty of pals, pick up fresh knowledge, and have tons of fun." He gazed up with those wide, thoughtful orbs, the warm amber shade mirroring his dad's, and responded with an wisdom that caught me off guard. "I understand, Mommy. I'll be the top learner there." And indeed, he was. Mike settled into the routine effortlessly, much like a creature in its habitat. Within weeks, educators were praising his swift grasp of lessons, his imaginative artwork, and his innate knack for guiding playmates. Evenings at home, he'd request bedtime readings, not kiddie tales, but what he dubbed big people volumes. Barely past 3, he could identify every alphabet letter and assemble some into basic terms. Felipe, glowing with satisfaction, sourced more challenging youth reads, intricate jigsaws, and brain-teasing toys to nurture his intellect. He'd dedicate afternoons sprawled in the lounge assembling block metropolises alongside his boy, fabricating epic yarns of valiant royals and enigmatic beasts, and calmly fielding the child's endless queries on the world's mechanics, from timepieces to constellations, aircraft to insects. Why does the heavens appear azure, Papa? In what way do sea creatures get oxygen below the surface? What the endless barrage of questions from our curious little one kept coming. Things like where the sun hides after dark. Felipe always sought out genuine scientific explanations, respecting his boy's sharp mind without a hint of dismissal. Those were the days when our daily life settled into a smooth, predictable flow. Felipe headed off to the office at dawn. I'd drop Mike at school, then return to whip up the fresh batches for my baking clients. Come afternoon, I'd scoop him up, and we'd share those precious hours tackling assignments, romping around the garden, and fixing up a meal so Felipe could unwind with something hot, waiting when he walked through the door. Over school breaks, we'd embark on modest getaways, often heading to Mike's dad's folks in Dallas or lounging for a stretch at Galveston Beach. Nothing extravagant about them. We opted for basic lodgings and packed our own grub to stretch the budget. Still, they brimmed with heartfelt delights. Towering sand forts, cones dripping under the sun, and gentle cruises on the waves. One outing sticks in my mind from January 1983, back when Mike was just 5. We were soaking up the rays at Galveston Beach that afternoon. Felipe had dashed off for some icy treats, leaving me to supervise our kid as he sculpted a clever network of channels in the damp shore, letting the tide ebb and flow through his creation. Out of nowhere, a bigger lad, maybe 8 or so, barreled in and purposely trampled straight across the setup, wrecking it all. I sprang to my feet at once, bracing to step in and soothe my boy. Certain tears were imminent. Yet astonishingly, Mike held back the sobs. He fixed the intruder with an oddly serene look and uttered in a tone far too steady for a kid, "You'll wish you hadn't done that." The other boy snickered derisively. "Oh yeah, what'll you do, kiddo? Run whining to your mom." Mike kept his eyes locked on him, stock still, that intense stare flashing for a split second, something eerily like the tales I'd heard of my great-grandpa. Then, in a blur, he scooped up a clump of soggy sand and flung it right into the boy's face, sending him toppling back with howls of agony. "Mike!" I shouted, hurrying over. "What on earth?" He pivoted to me, his features already softening back to my gentle child's, eyes round with confusion, as though he had no clue about his own actions. "He wrecked my castle, Mom," he stammered, voice quivering. I lost my temper. The dust-up wrapped up fast. I said sorry to the other kid's parent and clarified that this was totally out of character for Mike, just a spur-of-the-moment flare-up. Driving to our lodging, I pulled him aside for a firm chat on reining in our tempers and why lashing out at folks isn't the answer, no matter how furious we get. "Mike, we don't harm others," I told him. "Got it." He bobbed his head, looking truly sorry. "Sorry, Mom, I don't get it. It felt like someone else was tossing that sand." Back then, I chalked it up to a typical kid dodging blame. It wasn't until much later that I pondered if there might have been deeper honesty in those words than I'd ever guessed. That was merely a one-off, though. Overall, Mike was this endearing, cuddly, well-behaved tot. Folks around us, neighbors, educators, close acquaintances, all remarked on his manners, eagerness to lend a hand, and quick wits. A real gem, they'd call him, and he truly was during those idyllic early days. Then, in 1985, as Mike hit 7, an event unfolded that forever altered our household. Felipe, who'd been pouring double the effort into his job, scraped together the funds at last to launch his venture. Teaming up with Frank, an old school buddy, he launched Frontier Accounting, a small outfit brimming with big plans. Those months meant grueling effort, all-nighters and forfeited leisure time. He'd drag in drained, yet his gaze lit up with the thrill of aspirations taking shape. I pitched in however possible, crafting healthy lunches for his desk and keeping the place spotless to guard his scant downtime for recharging or bonding with our little guy. Mike, young as he was, grasped the weight of it all. He never griped if Dad skipped a classroom event or stumbled in past bedtime for a tuck-in. Rather, he took a shine to the enterprise, begging for office tours on Saturdays and gazing in awe while Felipe broke down ledgers, filings, and financials. "Someday I'll join you there, Dad," he declared one time, perched awkwardly in the oversized office chair. "Partners, you and me." Felipe beamed, moved, and tousled his hair. "You bet, buddy. It'll be Felipe and Son Accounting. What do you think?" His dedication bore fruit swiftly. Within 2 years, Frontier Accounting boasted a solid roster of clients, from key traders in Laredo to a few across the border in Mexico. Across the border in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, our enterprise was thriving, allowing us to pursue long-held aspirations. We swapped our aging sedan for a shiny new Ford, a true indulgence, oh my. We updated the kitchen in our home and signed Mike up for the city's premier private school. By 1988, as our boy reached 10 years old, we planned an extravagant birthday bash. Earlier celebrations had been low-key, a basic cake at home, a handful of pals, and simple presents. But with our finances steadier now, we aimed for something grand. We booked the local community center, brought in a decorator for a superhero motif. Mike adored Spider-Man. I arranged for a lavish 3-layer cake adorned with his favorite comic heroes. Felipe surprised him with a shiny new bike, the gift our kid had longed for, while I crafted a custom superhero cape featuring his initials, MR, stitched boldly on the front. The event was magical. More than 30 children showed up with games led by hired performers, and I assembled fancy goodie bags for everyone. Mike beamed with joy, dashing around to chat with buddies and flaunt his new cape. As we gathered to croon the birthday song, with him at the heart of it all amid loved ones and sharing joyful looks with Felipe, I felt our world was perfect. We'd crafted a treasured life, a loving union, an amazing child, and secure finances. The road ahead looked bright, brimming with potential. Little did I know that within a short time, the foundation we'd nurtured with such care would start to fracture, that the faint quirks in Mike's demeanor we'd occasionally spotted but dismissed were merely the opening act to a fierce tempest on the horizon. The ensuing years unfolded in a cozy rhythm. Mike excelled in academics, consistently ranking at the top, joining math challenges, science expos, and writing competitions. At 12, he tackled intricate novels, maintained a diary filled with remarkably insightful reflections, and displayed diverse skills, like strumming the guitar, a present for his 13th birthday, or sketching with remarkable detail. Yet we observed certain quirks. He was a passionate child. Once captivated by a subject, he'd immerse himself nearly fanatically. He cycled through obsessions, first dinosaurs, then stargazing, followed by quantum mechanics, delving into them with surprising sophistication for his years. He also leaned towards solitude. Though well-liked at school, he favored alone time, hours lost in his bedroom with books, notes, or artwork. Is this typical? I wondered to Felipe one evening, after Mike had holed up all Saturday on a mysterious endeavor he wouldn't reveal. Most boys his age crave outdoor adventures. Felipe soothed me. Our boy's unique, Helen. His intellect shines. It's expected he wouldn't chase the usual kid pursuits. Remember how Einstein was as a kid. I embraced that view because it suited me, far preferable to confronting any real issue. Truthfully, Mike was mostly a gifted, mildly withdrawn youth. He had companions, joined campus events, and shared his passions and ambitions with us. In 1993, on his 15th birthday, Felipe figured it was right to draw him into the family operation. Not formally employed, of course, he was underage, but as a helper over breaks and select weekends. Mike tagged along to the office, picking up fundamentals in bookkeeping and watching operations unfold. To our astonishment and pleasure, he displayed an innate talent for figures, structure, and financial logic. Within weeks, he handled basic duties independently, sorting files, inputting info into ledgers, fielding calls. Felipe glowed with satisfaction. "He's got a real talent for this, Helen," he'd exclaim enthusiastically. "After university, he'll transform the company. I bet Frontier Accounting will spread across the whole state with him in charge." Those days were golden. Mike appeared to discover direction, directing his sharp focus towards something fruitful. At dinner, we'd discuss prospects. He'd major in accounting, perhaps at the University of Texas in Austin or in Houston. Afterward, he'd return to ease into leading the firm. All felt aligned, mapped out, and hopeful, until 1995. Right after Mike's 17th birthday, I spotted the initial major shifts in his B. It began with minor signs. My son, once so meticulously tidy, now abandoned his space to clutter. Garments strewn about, volumes stacked haphazardly, journals splayed across his mattress. His rest patterns, previously so consistent, turned unpredictable. I'd occasionally discover him alert at 3 a.m., scribbling intensely in journals he'd conceal the instant I entered. "Just cramming, Mom," he'd say with a grin that failed to light his gaze. "Big exam coming up." Yet it was break time from school, no exams in sight. His eating habits shifted too. He'd relished our home-cooked dishes, the ones I put real effort into. Lately, he'd scarcely nibble at them. Weight was visibly melting off his teenage frame, outfits beginning to sag. "Getting enough food, honey?" I inquired one evening, concern mounting as I observed him merely nudging his rice around. "Feeling ill?" "Not famished," he snapped curtly. "And quit babying me, Mom. I handle my own stuff." The sharpness was unfamiliar. Mike had been courteous and considerate forever. These days, he'd respond with short fuses, flare up over trifles, and withdraw further into solitude. Felipe attempted a direct chat, figuring it was typical teen angst. "Buddy, your mother's concerned. So am I. If something's eating at you, spill it. We're in your corner. Nothing's off with me." Mike erupted, banging his door shut. "Back off, all of you." Calls from the school soon followed. Mike, the top performer, began ditching sessions. On days he showed, he appeared drained, struggling to focus. At other moments, he'd grow hyper, cutting in on instructors with irrelevant queries or remarks. His marks, once stellar, nosedived. "This troubles us," the counselor noted in a strained conference. "Michael's long been among our brightest. Such a sharp shift might signal deeper issues, perhaps substances, perhaps low mood. Seen any red flags at home?" We'd spotted plenty, yet voicing it from an expert in that stiff setting, surrounded by mounted credentials, drove home the gravity. No mere stage. Our boy faced genuine trouble. We resolved to seek medical advice. Persuading him proved tough. He yelled and fought back, charging us with labeling him insane. Felipe stood resolute, deploying a commanding voice he seldom invoked. "No debate, Mike. Doctor's visit happens. End of story." The physician conducted various exams, blood draws, urine samples, even imaging to exclude brain concerns. All clear. "Health-wise, he's sound," the doc reassured. "Still, I urge a mental health assessment, maybe with a specialist." That term, psychiatric, struck like thunder in our home. Felipe balked at first. "My boy's no lunatic, doc." But I pressed on. Dark links were forming in my mind, ones I dreaded. Tales of my great-grandpa Antonio, same age as Mike at 17, precisely when his troubles allegedly emerged. "One visit, Felipe," I urged, striving for composure amid my turmoil. "If it's benign, wonderful. If not, early intervention saves time." With hesitation, he yielded. I booked with Dr. Johnson, the local psychiatrist, a seasoned fellow known for skill, if a bit dated in approach. "Come appointment day," Mike balked. He barricaded himself in the lavatory, ignoring coaxing or warnings. "Gonna institutionalize me," he hollered from inside. "Ditch me like that mad relative from way back." A shiver raced through me. We'd kept Antonio's history from him, whence the knowledge. Only after Felipe vowed to force entry did he emerge. He seemed altered, oddly composed, nearly peaceful, sporting an eerie smirk. "Fine," he murmured softly. "Doctor, it is. You're correct. I feel off." The swift mood flip ought to have raised flags, but relief clouded my judgment. En route to the clinic, from the back seat, Mike softly tuned a melody unfamiliar to me. Glancing via the mirror, I caught his stare vacant, locked on nothing, mouth subtly forming words like in silent dialogue. Right then, eyeing him reflected on our drive to the expert, I confronted the dread I'd buried. In those eyes of my child gleamed the identical hollow gaze described in great-grandpa's final days, just prior to his attempt to strangle his sibling, and certainty crashed over me, crushing. Our lineage's horror had resurfaced. The session with Dr. Johnson proved enlightening, yet horrifying. At first, Mike seemed willing to open up at first, responding to the questions with what looked like straightforward answers. But as the doctor delved into his latest shifts in behavior, a change came over him. Our boy began talking at a rapid clip, leaping between ideas, tossing in elaborate terms within phrases that hardly held together. "The figures speak to me, Doc," he declared, his gaze gleaming with an almost manic fervor. "They possess hues and feels. 7 comes across as crimson and gritty, like coarse grit. 3 feels azure and slippery, reminiscent of a bar of soap. The cosmos hides in numeric designs, visible solely to me." Abruptly, he went quiet, fixing his stare on a bare spot in the corner. When the physician inquired about his thoughts, Mike murmured softly, "He's present. The fellow in the hat is whispering, 'You can't be relied upon.'" It was like the ground vanished under me. Felipe gripped my fingers tightly enough to sting, though I scarcely registered the pain. all my attention fixed on our child, who appeared locked in a lively exchange with nothing at all. Dr. Johnson's assessment came with restraint yet bluntly. Your boy is displaying signs pointing toward a disorder on the schizophrenia spectrum, hallucinations in sight and sound, fixed false beliefs, and scattered thought processes. The timing fits the usual start for such issues, particularly among males. He seemed so ordinary before. Felipe objected, his tone cracking. Incredibly bright, perfectly balanced. This condition frequently strikes the most gifted minds, the doctor clarified. Initial breakdowns in reality often follow stretches of typical behavior. It's a sly illness. Precisely because of that, by the time symptoms surface, the progression is typically quite far along. We departed that session armed with a script for meds and advice to pursue advanced care in Dallas from experts more versed in situations like Mike's. The ride back passed in heavy quiet. In the rear, our son had slipped back into muteness, gazing blankly through the glass. That evening, once Mike was settled for sleep, he swallowed his initial dose without a fuss, which caught me off guard. Felipe and I lingered on the veranda, fingers intertwined, grappling with the harsh truth emerging. "Everything will turn out fine," Felipe kept saying, mostly to reassure himself. "We'll line up top-notch care. The finest specialists. Our kid will beat this." I yearned to trust his words. God, how I did. Yet deep down I sensed our world had irrevocably altered. Those idyllic days lay in the past. Ahead stretched a shadowy, unpredictable, and frightening path. What lay beyond our grasp was the sheer horror awaiting us. We had no clue that within mere months we'd forfeit not just Mike's grip on reality, but the very foundation anchoring our household. That fate reserved an even fiercer ordeal, as the rage coursing through my great-grandfather's lineage would erupt in its rawest form via our own boy's actions. But that's a tale for the subsequent part of this harrowing chronicle that's defined my existence. One I must share, regardless of the toll, in hopes it aids other households battling the unseen beast of psychiatric turmoil. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. It means the world to me. In the days after the verdict, we existed in an odd suspension. The remedy from Dr. Johnson appeared to ease Mike's starkest issues, the visions, the restlessness, the fractured talk. He began resting more soundly, taking meals consistently, and resuming classes following a couple of weeks' break at home. For a fleeting, welcome instant, we convinced ourselves the physician might have overstated things, that it wasn't full-blown schizophrenia, merely a one-off bout of strain, a breakdown from the weight on an exceptional teen. How mistaken that hope proved. In March 1995, heeding Dr. Johnson's guidance, we headed to Dallas for a meeting with an authority, Dr. Anthony Roberts, a celebrated mental health expert deeply familiar with breakdowns in perception. His practice sat in a sleek structure within University Park, a far cry from our local doctor's quaint setup in Laredo. Courteous staff greeted us. The lounge offered plush seating, fresh periodicals, and a soothing fountain for ambiance. Mike, to our surprise, behaved impeccably that morning. He chose fitting clothes, chatted coherently on the 3-hour drive, and even teased his dad about the wild congestion in the metropolis. Upon arrival, he settled quietly in the lounge, browsing a journal on science with genuine curiosity. "I'm doing way better now," he told us prior to entering the exam room. "These pills are actually helping." Felipe clasped my hand, a spark of optimism lighting his weary look. "Look, our son's returning to us." The exam stretched nearly 2 hours. Dr. Roberts conferred with Mike privately at first, then us alone, and eventually the whole family. His method varied. Les's demeanor was more polished and empathetic than Dr. Johnson's, yet equally precise. He delved into a thorough medical history and probed into our family lineage. The reference to my great-grandfather, Antonio, sent a chill through me. He examined the current prescriptions and scheduled fresh evaluations. As the moment for the verdict arrived, his features softened into a compassionate yet grave look. Michael's symptoms align closely with paranoid schizophrenia, he clarified, employing clinical jargon that swirled hazily in my fretful thoughts. The ideas of reference, the voices he hears, the flattened emotions alternating with moments of lucidity, everything suggests a disorder within the schizophrenia family, probably influenced heavily by genetics. But he appears so stable right now, Felipe protested, his tone quivering with restrained feeling, practically ordinary. The physician acknowledged this with a knowing nod. That's typical of the illness, particularly early on. It waxes and wanes, with spells of seeming wellness giving way to episodes of decline. The drugs manage the manifestations, though they can't eradicate the underlying issue. Can he lead an everyday existence? I inquired. This had been the gnawing doubt plaguing me from the outset of this ordeal. Might he pursue education, a career, perhaps start his own household someday? With appropriate care, numerous individuals attain a decent standard of living, the doctor responded, selecting his phrasing with deliberate care. However, I must be forthright. Michael faces substantial hurdles ahead. Schizophrenia is an ongoing affliction demanding steady oversight from healthcare professionals, consistent dosing of medicine, and likely some adjustments to daily routines. We departed that session equipped with an updated regimen of contemporary pharmaceuticals at refined dosages, along with recommendations for supplementary interventions like counseling, vocational rehabilitation, and sessions for family guidance. Dr. Roberts proposed contemplating Mike's care in Dallas, citing the abundance of expert facilities there. Ponder this thoroughly, he counseled. It's a weighty choice. Relocating to another urban center might prove taxing, yet the advantages of a dedicated, interdisciplinary expertise could surpass the disruptions. En route to Laredo, we weighed our paths. Relocating to Dallas entailed abandoning our residence, Felipe's enterprise, my modest cadre of pastry patrons, and our full community ties. Yet remaining put would confine us to Dr. Johnson's care, as he was advancing in years and versed in somewhat antiquated approaches to recent advancements. Mike, positioned in the rear, stayed unusually quiet. When I queried his views on shifting to the bustling metropolis, he merely lifted his shoulders. "It won't change anything," he muttered, gazing outward. "The fellow in the hat will tag along regardless." A cold dread coursed through me. That figure in the hat, his recurring vision, hadn't surfaced in days. I'd assumed the treatment had banished it. I shared an alarmed look with Felipe, whose fingers clenched the wheel until they paled. We resolved to hold off, allowing the fresh drugs an opportunity to take effect and observing Mike's progress over the ensuing weeks prior to committing to such a bold step as uprooting our lives. Felipe conferred with Frank, his associate, regarding easing his professional commitments briefly to spend additional time with us. I streamlined my confectionery commissions, focusing solely on long-standing and lucrative accounts to free up hours for tending to our boy. Over the next several weeks, our choice appeared sound. Mike returned to classes on a full schedule and picked up some routine pursuits. The updated remedies brought drawbacks. He griped about parched lips, lethargy during daylight hours, and minor shakes in his fingers. But they effectively curbed the breaks from reality. The regular check-ins with Dr. Johnson proceeded smoothly and predictably. Come May, roughly 2 months post the Dallas visit, the stability began to crumble once more. It commenced when I discovered the tablets, scores of them, concealed within a volume on Mike's shelf. He had evidently skipped them for weeks, perhaps from our return onward. Naturally, I addressed it with him, starting gently in an effort to comprehend. "My boy, why conceal your treatment? You realize they're essential for your well-being." He met my gaze with an unfamiliar chill. "They dull me, weigh me down. My thoughts fog up on them. Yet the false beliefs resurface off them, Mike." A peculiar grin tugged at his mouth. "And what makes you so sure they're false, Mom? Suppose I perceive what eludes everyone else. Imagine the hat wearer exists, merely unseen by average folks." The exchange swiftly soured. Mike grew restless, striding across his space, waving at emptiness as though conversing with an unseen presence. As I reached to embrace and soothe him, he shoved me forcefully, toppling me onto the mattress. "Keep away," he bellowed, eyes bulging with terror and fury. "He claims you're scheming to harm me, that the pills are toxic." Felipe pulled up from his job amid this turmoil. I'd never witnessed him in such terror before, frozen in the bedroom entrance as he observed our 17-year-old boy engulfed in a psychotic episode, hurling wild, unfounded claims our way. We contacted Dr. Johnson right away, and he rushed over to the house. That's when he first brought up the idea of committing him to a facility. If he's refusing meds on his own and displaying hostile actions along with severe paranoid fantasies, he might require a short stint in a medical environment for recovery, the physician clarified. In the adjacent room, meanwhile, Mike kept muttering to himself, his tone now hushed and scheming. The thought of sending our child to a hospital shattered us emotionally. We'd always pictured mental health centers as grim, soul-crushing spots overrun with doped-up residents and harsh therapies. Yet Dr. Johnson convinced us that modern practices had evolved significantly over the years. The adolescent unit at St. Luke's Psychiatric Hospital in Dallas stood out for its quality. He described it. Care there emphasizes compassion, aiming for balance and eventual return to daily life. This wouldn't involve an extended stay, just enough duration to tweak his prescriptions and confirm Michael's consistent adherence. With heavy hearts, we consented to weighing the choice. But prior to reaching any conclusion, Mike appeared to rally out of nowhere. Come morning, he descended for the meal, composed and nearly peaceful. He expressed regret for the previous evening's outburst and vowed to stick with his treatment plan. It was merely a foggy instant for me, he noted, but things are sharper now. Just a minor lapse, Mom, he added submissively, downing the tablet I set next to his juice. No repeats from here. I desperately hoped it was true, and for a short while I truly trusted it. I oversaw each dosage myself, verifying he ingested it fully rather than tucking it beneath his tongue, a trick I uncovered he'd employed before. Mike slipped back into his usual pattern, classes, returning home, and occasional visits to his dad's workplace on Saturdays. He came across as steady, virtually ordinary. Precisely as we relaxed our vigilance, disaster struck. That June Friday, Mike failed to arrive from school at his typical hour. Around 5 p.m., concern began to build. By 6 hours, full-blown alarm set in. I phoned every acquaintance of his I could recall, the academy, and even the local precinct. Zilch from anyone. Felipe set off in search, cruising the spots our kid favored. The main park, the community library, the soccer pitch at the town's outskirts. Still nothing. He got back near 9 p.m., looking ashen, his gaze bloodshot from suppressed sobs. Time to head to the authorities, he resolved. This defies normalcy. Something's gone wrong. We prepared to depart just as the jingle of keys echoed at the entrance. Mike entered, locks disheveled, outfit soiled and creased, reeking sharply of booze. "Where on earth were you?" Felipe bellowed, his words laced with both solace and rage. "You've had us frantic." Mike grinned, but it was hollow, eyes unchanging, carrying a cynical, grown-up edge. Hooked up with some pals in Nuevo Laredo, folks who get me for real. Nuevo Laredo sat across the boundary in Mexico, mere minutes from central Laredo. The pair of towns blended seamlessly, divided solely by the Rio Grande, that notorious divide between the United States and Mexico. Which pals? I pressed, spotting his pupils unnaturally wide, beyond mere drink. What substances did you ingest, Mike? He chuckled. Stuff that lifts my spirits, Mom. Better at silencing the whispers than the drugs you make me choke down. Felipe advanced and seized his boy's wrist. Drugs. Tell me straight. What went down? The ensuing chaos unfolded in a blur, too swift for me to fully grasp. Mike yanked free abruptly and swung at his dad's jaw. Felipe reeled back, stunned more than injured, a trickle of crimson at his lips' edge. "Hands off," Mike screamed, gaze frantic and untamed. "Stay away, both of you. You're fakes. Not my folks. The true ones got swapped out." It embodied the typical Capgras syndrome, a term I learned amid frantic research on the condition afterward. The firm belief that loved ones, often relatives, have been substituted by doppelgangers, a frequent marker in specific forms of paranoid schizophrenia. That evening descended into horror. Mike swung between furious outbursts, smashing items, issuing threats, and spells of raw dread curled up in shadows, pleading with the doubles to spare him. We summoned Dr. Johnson again, arriving with a pair of aides from the nearby clinic. It demanded physical intervention to subdue our boy and administer a tranquilizer. "No alternatives left," the doctor stated, eyeing Mike drift into slumber on the den couch amid the debris of his fury's destruction. "Hospital admission is urgent now." The following day, a overcast Saturday that felt to confront the shadows within us, we embarked on the hardest journey of our lives. Mike, still groggy from the sedative, hardly noticed the unfolding events. We positioned him in the car's rear seat, draped a blanket over him, and set off on the extended drive to Dallas. The intake procedures at St. Luke's Hospital proceeded with unexpected smoothness, yet they left us emotionally shattered. We completed paperwork, provided consents, and conferred with physicians, counselors, and therapists. Over and over, we recounted the sequence of events, the initial signs, the formal diagnosis, his rejection of treatment, and the ferocious outburst from the previous evening. As the moment for farewell arrived, Mike had sharpened his awareness, grasping the reality at hand. The terror in his gaze upon understanding he'd be abandoned there amid unfamiliar faces in an alien environment nearly shattered my determination. "Mom, please don't," he pleaded, clutching my hand with desperation. In that instant, he reverted to being my little boy, free from the tormented adolescent of the prior night. "Don't abandon me here. I swear I'll behave. I'll follow the prescriptions. I'll get everything in order." Felipe, standing next to me, fought back emotion, his cheeks streaked with unchecked tears from the ordeal we'd endured. "This is to help you, son, only until you're on your feet again." "I'm fine now," Mike protested, his eyes darting wildly over the stark clinical walls of the intake area. "Dad, Mom, I beg you, don't leave me behind." It demanded every ounce of my willpower to release his grip, to retreat a pace as the staff approached to escort him. The raw, primal howl of anguish that escaped him as he was guided away resonates in my darkest dreams to this day. "You'll regret this," he roared while being pulled along the corridor. Gone was my child's familiar tone. In its place, a twisted echo warped by fury and illness. "You're not my real parents. True parents wouldn't dump me in a psych ward." Driving back alone in the vehicle without our boy, the quiet between Felipe and me hung heavy, nearly unbearable. Language felt powerless against the overwhelming grief consuming us. He piloted the car on autopilot, staring ahead at the highway, now and then brushing aside a persistent droplet. "We made the correct call," he whispered at last, midway through the return. "There was no other path." "You're right," I responded, though doubt lingered in my core. Still, why does the proper choice wound so deeply? The ensuing days carried an eerie, spectral quality. Our home, once buzzing with Mike's energy, even during his toughest moments, now resembled a tomb. His vacant bedroom, the unused spot at the meal table, the hush of mornings devoid of his rushed preparations for classes. We phoned the facility daily, desperate for updates. Early on, details were sparse. "He's settling in," they'd report. "Adaptation takes time. It's expected." Visits were barred the first week per guidelines for those in severe distress, as they clarified. At long last, following 10 days that dragged like forever, permission came to see him. We repeated that 3-hour haul to Dallas, our spirits weighed down by blended anticipation and dread. The facility proved less foreboding than I'd imagined. especially the adolescent section, which offered a surprisingly comforting vibe. Softly hued walls, a shared lounge stocked with board games and reading materials, and modest yet tidy quarters, housing no more than 2 residents each. Mike shared his space with a smaller kid, apparently dealing with emotional instability. Spotting us in the visitation area, he displayed no elation of the sort we'd quietly yearned for. He appeared composed, bordering on detached. "That's the meds at work," a caregiver clarified afterward. For nearly an hour, we chatted about mundane surface-level topics. He inquired about home life, local folks, and Felipe's job. He sidestepped any reference to his state, the therapy, or a potential release date. Only as departure neared did he meet our stares directly, a sharp, present look, reminiscent of our earlier Mike. "I regret my actions," he murmured softly. "I wasn't present that evening. That wasn't truly me." Felipe enveloped him in an embrace, weeping openly. "We understand, son. No fault lies with you. We only wish for your healing." "I will heal," he vowed, squeezing back with a fervor that caught me off guard. "The staff here knows their craft. I'm sticking to the regimen. The whispers have faded, grown remote." We returned home, lighter, buoyed by fresh optimism. Perhaps the stay had indeed been wise. Perhaps our child was charting a course toward wellness. The weeks ahead settled into routine. Saturdays brought our visits to Mike, each revealing subtle advances. His face brightened more. His words flowed logically. His passion slowly reignited for old loves like literature, experiments, and his dad's enterprise. Clinicians noted marked gains, an effective tweak to his dosing, and encouraging signs for a sooner-than-expected release. In July, roughly a month post-admission, we convened with the entire healthcare team, including the psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, and occupational therapist. The consensus was that Mike had been making remarkable strides in his recovery. Among the topics covered were future plans, such as leaving the hospital, scheduling ongoing outpatient care, and potentially resuming classes in the upcoming semester. Establishing a consistent daily schedule was deemed essential, yet without adding undue stress. The psychiatrist stressed that easing back into everyday routines should proceed slowly and under close supervision. Ultimately, we settled on Felipe leasing a modest apartment in Dallas on a short-term basis. I plan to relocate there alongside Mike, allowing him to persist with his outpatient sessions while adjusting to non-hospital life. Felipe would split his schedule between Laredo, where his accounting job demanded his attendance, and Dallas, visiting during weekends and holidays. "This setup isn't perfect, but it'll only last a while," he reassured me. Despite the confidence in his words, I noticed the anxiety in his gaze, not merely from the time apart, but from the mounting financial strain. Securing a rental in the urban area, sustaining dual households, and the recurring commutes would weigh heavily on our finances. The priority, however, remained ensuring our boy received top-tier care. By late July, Mike was released from the facility. He emerged transformed, a slimmer youth with a gravity and maturity beyond his 17 years, yet steadier, more engaged, and acutely conscious of his illness and the imperative to manage it. "I won't ever skip my medications again," he vowed, while we packed his sparse possessions into the vehicle. I've seen firsthand the fallout from that mistake. Our leased place sat in the Country Club Estates area. It lacked the sophistication of University Park, home to Dr. Roberts' practice, but offered an agreeable setting with convenient proximity to the medical center for check-ins. The unit was compact, 2 bedrooms, a shared living and dining space with the kitchen, and a single bath, though it carried a warm, inviting feel. I equipped it with basic necessities, aiming to foster a comforting atmosphere despite our tight budget. Felipe joined us for the initial weekend, assisting in setting up the space and confirming our well-being and security. As he departed that Sunday evening, a sharp ache gripped my chest, unrelated to the usual ache of spousal distance. It felt like an intuition, a hazy yet nagging dread that all wasn't right. that our seeming triumph against the disorder was tenuous at best. "Everything will turn out fine," Felipe comforted me, enveloping me in a firm embrace prior to climbing into the car for the lengthy drive home. "We've found our footing now." Those initial weeks in Dallas unfolded with unexpected tranquility. Mike adhered strictly to his regimen: counseling sessions thrice weekly, psychiatric visits every other week, and pills taken precisely on schedule. He began participating in a peer group for teens facing mental health challenges, where he finally connected with others who grasped his experiences intimately. I signed him up for a college prep program aimed at the admissions test, less rigorous than standard schooling, but engaging enough for his inquisitive intellect. On brighter moments, he evoked the pre-crisis version of himself, inquisitive, eloquent, brimming with aspirations. "College is still my goal," he shared one evening over a meal at our modest table. "Not necessarily accounting, like Dad hoped. I've been leaning towards psychology, to get a deeper insight into this," he remarked, tapping his temple with a wry grin. Naturally, there were tougher periods as well. Times when the drugs felt overwhelmingly burdensome, rendering him sluggish and withdrawn. Occasions marked by adverse reactions, shakes, parched throat, lightheadedness, that sparked irritation and discontent. Moments when the auditory hallucinations, subdued but persistent, murmured uncertainties and amplified anxieties. "That figure in the hat still shows up occasionally," he confessed in a therapy meeting we attended together. "Not as vivid anymore, but like a fleeting silhouette at the edge of my vision. I no longer trust his words. I recognize he's imaginary, yet he lingers." True to his commitment, Felipe arrived each weekend. He'd pull in Friday evening, drained from the journey and grueling schedule, yet beaming with treats in hand. A fresh novel for Mike, blooms for me, and signature Tex-Mex delights unavailable locally. Those fleeting days together mimicked ordinary family life. We'd catch a film, stroll through green spaces, explore historic districts. Mike appeared particularly animated then, as though his dad's arrival ignited something essential, replenishing the spark absent during the week. Come September, after 2 months in this pattern, conversations turned to heading back to Laredo. Dr. Roberts expressed measured hopefulness. "Michael's advancing solidly," he noted in a consultation that Felipe also joined, "but I advise extending the concentrated monitoring here in the city for several more months before he was contemplating a return to his roots back home." His sense of security was still quite fresh. Felipe let out a heavy sigh, weariness plain across his features. The regular commutes, the dual burdens, overseeing the business on the border while aiding the household in Dallas, all of it was wearing him down. "We'll adhere to the doctor's advice," he conceded. "Our boy's health comes first, ahead of any individual comfort, though I must devise a more viable path for the company. I can't sustain being absent 4 days each week forever." The answer arrived through an unforeseen offer. Frank, Felipe's business associate, proposed establishing a satellite office for Frontier Accounting in Dallas. He would remain at the helm of the primary site in Laredo, as Felipe took on shaping the fresh venture in the bustling metropolis, enabling the family to settle together for good. "It's a financial gamble," Felipe confessed during our talk about the plan, launching an outpost in a major hub amid stiff rivalry, yet it could be our prime chance to unite without jeopardizing Mike's care. The choice solidified over the ensuing months. As Mike persisted with his therapy, Felipe dove into the expansion effort, scouting ideal spots, navigating red tape, and cultivating clients from the ground up. It marked a stretch of grueling labor for him and an era of adaptation for the entire family. By October, a feeling of fresh starts emerged. We swapped the leased flat for a roomier one, better suited for long-term living. Fresh furnishings were acquired, and we adorned the spaces with pieces from our border dwelling, blending familial warmth with the vibrancy of renewal. Mike appeared to thrive in this setup, His dad's steady companionship, the reliability of daily rhythms, and ongoing medical support all fueled his consistent advancement. He began discussing tangible goals for the upcoming year's college admissions, potential schools, and fields that captivated him. Come November, right before turning 18, we shared one of the deepest exchanges since his condition first surfaced. We sat in the den post-meal alone together. Felipe had headed to work for an urgent client issue. "Mom," he started, pausing, gaze locked on the screen before us. "Do you believe I'll stay this way forever, always unwell?" His words caught me off guard, though I'd sensed he'd harbored them for ages. I drew in a steadying breath, seeking the truest, most tender response possible. "I believe you'll require ongoing attention, Mike. Meds, check-ins. Schizophrenia lacks a cure, for now anyway. But that doesn't bar you from a rich, joyful, fulfilling existence. How can I find joy? Knowing control might slip away any time. Knowing the voices could return fiercer, that I might harm those closest to me, like I nearly did with Dad." The raw pain in his voice pierced me deeply. I clasped his chilled hands in mine, despite the balmy evening air. "You're not defined by your illness, Mike. You're far greater. Sharp-minded, empathetic, gifted. You recognize your challenges, pursue treatment, and spot the early signals. That's victory in itself." He inclined his head gradually, taking in my counsel. "I'm terrified I'll never claim a typical existence. A partner, children, a profession. Plenty with schizophrenia achieve those things, son. It won't be simple. It won't match your youthful dreams, but it's attainable. And your dad and I will support you at every turn." A wistful grin curved his mouth. "You've both been amazing. After all I put you through, the chaos I caused, here you are, reshaping everything for my sake." "Because our love for you surpasses all else," I replied. "It's been true from the moment you were merely a hope inside me. It always will." That evening, as I rested in bed awaiting Felipe's return, I pondered our path thus far, the shattering revelation of his diagnosis, the agonizing hospital stay, the relocation to Dallas, and the slow piecing together of our world amid this altered truth. Undeniably, it had been our toughest year, yet one of revelations too, of fortifying ties, of grasping what held real value. Sleep claimed me with a tranquility long absent. A tentative calm, maybe, resting on shaky ground, but calm nonetheless. I never foresaw it as the final serene evening for an exceedingly long stretch. Fate, unquenched by the ordeals it had already unleashed, was gearing up its most merciless, unfeeling strike. A strike that would shatter our hard-won equilibrium and forever claim the partner who'd anchored me for more than 2 decades. That November night in 1995 unfolded much like countless before. Felipe phoned to mention he'd be I was stuck at the office a bit longer than usual. A key client from the border region was dealing with major issues on his tax filings and required immediate assistance. "No need to stay awake for me," I told him, hearing the fatigue in his voice through the receiver. It could drag on for some time. I shared a meal with Mike. We caught an episode on television and chatted about arrangements for his approaching 18th birthday. By about 10th hour, he swallowed his evening pills and headed off to sleep. I lingered a while more in the den, working on a pullover that was meant to be Felipe's holiday present, forcing myself not to glance at the time every few minutes. 11 at night. 1 in the early hours. Weariness eventually won out. I jotted a quick message on the dining counter. "Food's warming in the range. Love you." Then I turned in, picturing that I'd wake to find Felipe beside me, as had happened so often on his late returns. The call came at 4:27 a.m. I recall the precise moment since I checked the glowing red digits on the bedside alarm, piercing the bedroom's shadows. 4:27, the instant everything shifted irrevocably. It was Frank, Felipe's colleague, phoning from Laredo. His words shook so violently that the initial words were hard to make out. Details about a crash, a brawl in a tavern, authorities attempting to reach out. "Take it easy, Frank," I urged, propping myself upright in the sheets, my pulse already pounding with a dreadful foreboding. "What do you mean? What kind of mishap involving Felipe? He's gone." The declaration struck like a brutal blow, knocking the air from my lungs, sending the walls whirling. This had to be a mistake. Felipe was supposed to be in Dallas, handling matters at the office. Frank was surely mistaken, perhaps intoxicated, or this was some cruel prank. "That can't be right," I responded, my tone more composed than I'd imagined. "Felipe's right here in Dallas. He worked overtime at the firm yesterday evening." A thick quiet hung on the line. Then Frank's voice broke through tears. "He was down here, Helen. He arrived yesterday afternoon to sort out the issue with Al Mendoza, that vineyard account. He mentioned driving back to Dallas come morning." My thoughts balked at accepting it. Felipe had never breathed a word about heading to Laredo. Why keep it secret from me, if not for? "What went down, Frank?" I pressed, an icy shiver tracing my back. "Give me the full account." Bit by bit, amid agonizing gaps and muddled accounts, the events unfolded. Felipe had traveled to Laredo that afternoon unannounced to tackle the client's troubles in person. After wrapping up business, he stopped at a local pub, a modest, decent spot in the downtown area, to link up with acquaintances before crashing at our long-standing property, which we hadn't yet sold. The place sat perilously near the frontier, a zone where national boundaries faded, contraband thrived, and outlaw bands moved with little interference. On that evening, members of one such outfit, the Border Crew, a notorious bunch trafficking booze and smokes, were present. Roughly 8 guys deep in their cups, stirring trouble and pestering fellow drinkers. Felipe, ever the peacemaker, stepped in to calm things when a thug began accosting the server. "Back off the lady," he apparently stated, positioning himself between the brute and the employee. "She's only working." Basic, polite remarks, ones that sealed his fate. The fellow resented the meddling. He drew a hefty blade, a rugged outdoorsman's tool, and lunged without hesitation, slashing Felipe in the gut. One swift, penetrating wound. His accomplices yanked him away over the line into U.S. territory, out of reach of Mexican authorities. Felipe made it to the local medical center swiftly, but the blood loss proved overwhelming. He passed away under the surgeon's knife, denied any final words, any struggle. At 3:48 a.m., his passing was formally recorded. After ending the call, I lay frozen in the bed, incapable of weeping, shouting, or reacting. A peculiar detachment gripped me, like observing the scene from afar, as if it were another woman learning her spouse of 2 decades had fallen victim to a saloon scuffle. I'm unsure how much time passed in that stupor, perhaps moments, perhaps longer. Dawn was breaking when I at last stirred. My initial clear notion turned to Mike. How would I break it to our boy, still vulnerable from his condition, that his dad had met a violent end? How to shield him from devastation that could undo his recent gains? I chose to hold off until he roused naturally. There was no hurry. Felipe's loss was final, and I required that brief window to absorb the horror, to summon the resolve to support my child as his anchor. I drew a steaming shower, allowing the sobs to flow at last, blending with the stream. I changed into clothes on autopilot, brewed some Java. I sat down at the kitchen table and just waited. Around 8 o'clock, Mike showed up, his hair tousled from slumber, his gaze still foggy from the previous evening's meds. He grinned at the sight of me, that drowsy, pure grin of his. "Morning, Mom. Where's Dad?" The query felt so everyday, so ordinary that for a wild moment I considered fibbing, telling him Felipe had headed out early and would return shortly, delaying the crushing sorrow that loomed ahead. But staring into my boy's eyes, those warm, amber ones just like his father's, I realized I couldn't go through with it. "Son," I started, my tone quivering no matter how hard I tried to steady it. "Something awful has occurred. Your dad. He traveled to Laredo yesterday to handle a client's issue. And then..." The phrase stuck in my throat. How do you break the news that the person he idolized above all, his champion, his anchor, had been fatally knifed in a brawl at a roadside tavern? How do you wrap your head around something so vicious, so pointless, and voice it? "He's gone, isn't he?" Mike said, his words eerily steady. "The guy in the hat warned me this was coming." A chill raced through me. The guy in the hat. That recurring delusion of Mike's, one we'd believed the pills had tamed. Had it resurfaced, or was this mere cruel chance? "Yes, honey," I affirmed, grasping his hands over the tabletop. "There was a scuffle in a bar. He stepped in to shield a woman from some creeps, and someone came at him with a blade. He didn't pull through." I'd braced for sobs, outbursts, rejection, any typical response to mourning. What I witnessed instead chilled me deeper. A withdrawal, a rift, like a veil had dropped across Mike's eyes, walling him off from the world. "He warned me," my boy echoed, his stare locked on something beyond my shoulder. "The guy in the hat said Dad was going to abandon us, that it'd only be you and me from now on, and that was for the best." "Mike," I urged, gripping his hands tighter, desperate to pull him back. "That's not true. Your father didn't choose to go. It was a horrific mishap, a disaster. Nobody saw it coming." But he wasn't hearing me anymore. He rose suddenly, shuffled to the window, and began whispering to himself, or perhaps to an unseen figure only he perceived. The breakdown we dreaded was unfolding, triggered by the jolt of bereavement. I dialed Dr. Roberts right away, spilling the details in frantic, fear-laced bursts. He grasped the urgency and vowed to rush over to our place. For now, he advised, administer an additional dose of his crisis meds. Stay composed around him. Avoid challenging him. Don't dismiss his visions or voices. Simply stay by his side. The hours that followed blurred into a haze of calls, gut-wrenching choices, and urgent logistics. Felipe's remains had to be brought back from Laredo to Dallas. Arrangements for the service were essential. Relatives needed notifying, and most crucially, Mike required steadying. Dr. Roberts pulled up near 10 a.m. Circle with a psych nurse in tow. They discovered Mike deep in a raging psychotic break, chatting lively with his dad, who in his fractured thoughts lounged on the couch in the living room, explaining how his passing was merely a clever ploy to outwit the shadowy stalkers haunting his fantasies. "He's completely detached," the doctor noted after examining my son. "His psyche is shielding him from the overwhelming hurt by crafting a parallel world where Dad's still here." "What now?" I inquired, drained and shattered, dreading the response I sensed. "He requires urgent admission to a facility. It's too risky keeping him home like this. He might injure himself or someone else." And just like that, on the very day my spouse was taken from me, I faced committing my son once more. Not to St. Luke's Hospital this time, but to a sleek, upscale center with cutting-edge care, funded by the life insurance Felipe, ever the forward thinker, had secured long ago. The ensuing days marked the bleakest stretch of my life. The viewing for Felipe dragged on in a numb fog, as though I floated outside myself, observing it all. Acquaintances I scarcely recognized, clasping my hand, extending sympathies, whispering solace that barely penetrated my haze. Mike's absence, doped up in a mental health ward and oblivious to his dad's last rites, added another layer of agony, like my world was unraveling piece by piece, grief stacking upon grief. The interment happened in Dallas, not Laredo. I couldn't stomach burying Felipe in the town that stole him away. Plus, our roots were planted in Dallas these days. As heartbreaking as it was to face, we had zero intention of heading back to the frontier. Frank, Felipe's business associate, proved invaluable through it all. He managed the bureaucracy and legal hurdles for the firm. He ensured swift entry to Felipe's portion of Frontier accounting, and that the policy for insurance got promptly engaged. The delivery went smoothly, without any unexpected issues that might compound the overwhelming sorrow already burdening me. 1 week following the burial, once the apartment had cleared out of sympathetic family members and concerned companions, I found myself solitary on the balcony, observing the evening sky fade over Dallas. It was a breathtaking display, with hues of amber and rose that Felipe would have eagerly captured on film. The splendor of the scene stood in stark opposition to the void gnawing at my core. Right there on that balcony, I permitted the complete truth of my circumstances to overwhelm me. I was on my own. My spouse, my lifelong companion, had suffered a savage killing. My sole child lay in the hospital amid a grave mental breakdown. The ordeal had likely, and perhaps irreversibly, exacerbated his state. The existence we'd so meticulously reconstructed in Dallas lay in ruins, destroyed in mere moments. I wept until exhaustion claimed my tears, until my frame throbbed from the strain of unrelenting sobs. I mourned Felipe, the existence we'd forged as a pair, the aspirations we'd never fulfill. I grieved for Mike, for the hazy path ahead of him, for the endless struggle against the shadows tormenting his thoughts. I lamented my own fate, for the person I once embodied and could no longer become. As the sun at last dipped below the skyline, I rose, dried my cheeks, and resolved to hold myself together. Not at this juncture, not when my boy required my support like never before. Felipe had departed, yet Mike persisted in his battle, and I vowed to stand with him to my final days. The ensuing months formed a grueling path of adaptation. Mike stayed in the facility for 6 weeks, undergoing rigorous care with fresh prescriptions, consistent sessions, and cutting-edge methods to manage his hallucinations, which now featured repeated dialogues with his late father. I called on him daily, lingering for hours at his bedside, even as he scarcely registered me, immersed in his private turmoil. I recited stories from his youthful favorites, updates from the daily paper, and notes from former classmates. I spoke of Felipe, of the recollections we held dear, aiming to gently guide him toward acknowledging the permanence of the bereavement. At the same time, I handled everyday concerns I'd never envisioned confronting solo. What fate for Frontier accounting? I lacked any expertise in the domain. I couldn't assume Felipe's role in running the enterprise. Frank proposed purchasing my portion, promising an equitable sum and steady installments that would secure my finances for several years. As for the residence in Laredo, retaining it would tether me painfully to the site of Felipe's slaying. Parting with it would sever the final tangible links to the town where we'd established our household and savored countless joyful times. Choices upon choices, all resting solely upon me, devoid of Felipe's counsel to debate, reflect, or guide, not to mention a son clear-headed enough to weigh in. It was in those days that I unearthed a reservoir of resilience within myself that I hadn't recognized. I grew to rely on my instincts, to navigate tough calls, and to endure their outcomes. I parted with the border property and agreed to Frank's bid for Felipe's stake in the company. I restructured our monetary affairs to guarantee that, regardless of circumstances, Mike would forever possess the means for his care. In January 1996, 2 months post Felipe's passing, Mike at last left the hospital. He appeared steadier. The visions were subdued by the updated drugs, and the fact of his father's demise was slowly embraced, if only superficially. Yet the youth who returned differed profoundly, more subdued, introspective, his gaze often remote and seldom alight. The physicians noted this was anticipated, stemming from the potent drug's influence, the typical grieving progression, and schizophrenia's own advancement. He might not revert to his prior self entirely, Dr. Roberts cautioned in one consultation. The priority henceforth lay in steadiness, safety, and structure. That's precisely what I endeavored to foster. I transformed our living space into a haven of serenity and reliability. Fixed schedules for eating, pills, and counseling, a serene setting free of overwhelming triggers that might provoke an episode. A steady companionship, watchful yet unobtrusive. Mike had recently reached 18, an adult by law but far more fragile in spirit than any youngster. The aspiration of higher education was deferred for the time being. In its place, he began attending a community recovery program thrice weekly, joining healing sessions, peer circles, and leisure pursuits alongside peers facing comparable challenges. The pattern held for a spell. Glimmers of optimism surfaced now and then. Traces of the former Mike flickered through, a sharp observation on a novel in progress, a sudden quip at the table, a rekindled passion for sketching, a pursuit he'd cherished since boyhood. Still, the equilibrium proved tenuous, erected upon unstable ground. Just a single spark could set it off. A snapshot of Felipe that popped up out of nowhere, a tune playing on the radio that brought back memories of his dad, or even an offhand reference to Laredo in casual chat. Suddenly, the panic would surge, his eyes would glaze over into the distance, and his mouth would form words in hushed talks with unseen figures. Initially, these episodes passed quickly and could be managed with his rescue meds, the deep breathing exercises from his sessions, and my steady support right there beside him. Over time, though, they grew more common, more overwhelming, and tougher to pull back from. In March, one episode stood out as especially horrifying. I jolted awake in the dead of night to see Mike looming by my bedside, clutching a pocket knife, his stare vacant and locked on me. "I have to verify," he whispered, his tone flat and robotic, "to see if you're genuine or just pretending." I somehow talked him down, convinced him to drop the blade, guided him to his room, and gave him the urgent dose. Yet that evening shattered something deep within me. The harsh truth of our life hit home inescapably. During his breakdowns, my boy threatened harm to himself, and possibly to me too. Come morning, I reached out to Dr. Roberts. Our talk dragged on, raw and agonizing, with me sobbing and him offering quiet pauses. Ultimately, the decision loomed unavoidable. Mike required constant oversight and support that I couldn't handle solo anymore. The doctor soothed me, his words kind yet resolute. "There are choices available, Helen. This isn't some outdated sanitarium. Think of contemporary, compassionate recovery homes with round-the-clock staff, organized routines, peer connections, and your frequent visits. More like a retirement facility," I shot back, bitterness rising as shame clawed at me. "I'm ditching my child." "Not at all," he countered firmly. "This is the right move for his sake, guaranteeing the help he deserves. It's love in action, not desertion." I yearned to trust his words. I had to. But in the ensuing weeks, as I toured facilities, consulted experts, and completed paperwork, the sense of betraying Mike and flopping as a parent clung relentlessly. How do you tell a vulnerable 18-year-old still reeling from losing his father that he can't stay with his mom anymore? How do you convey that it's not dismissal or neglect, but the sole path to protect his health and security? The dreaded discussion unfolded in April during a bright, clear afternoon. Mike was in a solid phase, sharp and engaged, even pitching in with lunch prep. I joined him on the veranda, clasping his hands, and laid it out as tenderly as I could. Shockingly, he didn't fight or blame, just gave a knowing dip of his head, a weary exhale, then posed a query that crushed me. "Is this on account of that knife incident? You fear me now, right?" "No fear of you, my boy," I answered, my sight clouding with tears. "I'm terrified for what might befall you. When the whispers overwhelm, you risk serious injury. I couldn't live with myself if harm came to you under my watch." He inclined his head gradually, eyes wandering toward the skyline. "The guy in the hat claims this is for the best, that I should stay clear of you, that I'm hazardous." Those phrases struck like daggers. The illness wasn't merely eroding his thoughts, it was robbing him of unconditional affection, the assurance of being valued enough for nurturing bonds and everyday life. "That hat-wearing figure is mistaken," I declared resolutely, cupping his face to draw his gaze to mine. "You're no threat. You're my child, the beat of my very soul. Nothing alters that. And I'm not banishing you. I'll drop by daily, join your therapy, stay involved. We'll simply rest under separate roofs." I'm unsure if he truly bought it. How could he? Still, he yielded with a defeat that hinted he grasped, on some instinctive plane, why the shift was essential. In May 1996, half a year following Felipe's passing, Mike relocated to New Horizon Therapeutic Residence, a fresh setup on Dallas's fringes. Outwardly, it appeared inviting. A spacious, breezy building amid tidy grounds, private quarters for those staying, inviting shared spaces, and a dedicated crew focused on residents' welfare. Move-in day, I assisted in settling his space, hanging our pictures, shelving his beloved reads on the compact unit, and tucking in the familiar linens from our house to ease the unfamiliarity. As farewell neared, he embraced me fiercely, unexpectedly. "Everything will turn out fine, Mom," he breathed, oddly flipping our dynamic as though he were consoling me. I get the reason behind this. Returning to the vacant apartment that evening, I allowed the sobs to flow unchecked. Within a single year, violence had claimed my husband. And now this merciless illness was, in its own way, stealing my son from me by eroding his thoughts. Our once cozy home, meant to cradle our loved ones, had dwindled into a quiet void occupied solely by my presence, encircled by snapshots and echoes of an existence that felt alien, like it happened in a distant era. During the ensuing months, I built a fresh daily rhythm. I stopped by to see Mike each day, joined the support gatherings hosted by the facility, and kept in steady touch with his physicians and counselors. On brighter moments, I'd escort him for brief excursions, a stroll through the adjacent green space, a latte at the local cafe, or even a meal back at the flat on Saturdays. He appeared to be settling in fairly decently. The fine-tuned drugs, the organized schedule, and the reliable oversight from the experts all fostered a steadiness impossible to sustain in our old place. Incidents arose naturally. Periods when I'd discover him more bewildered and remote, conversing with his late father or that unrelenting figure in the fedora. But the staff handled them swiftly, averting the intense breakdowns I'd endured before. "He's advancing," the specialists reassured me, gradually yet forward, and I yearned to trust their words. I had to trust them. To occupy the hollow hours and the overwhelming quiet of the space, I resumed employment. Not baking the desserts that once sparked delight in Laredo, I'd forfeited any relish for crafting treats amid such hardship. Rather, I accepted a position as a front desk attendant at a healthcare center close by. The duties were straightforward, yet they occupied time, offered some social contact, and crucially, lay only a quarter hour from the care home, letting me drop in on Mike over my midday meal or right after clocking out. I resembled an uprooted shrub, straining to push forth fresh shoots in barren ground. Each minor custom, each budding connection, each formed pattern represented an effort to forge order and purpose in a reality stripped of its core anchors. The initial anniversary of Felipe's passing hit like a tempest in a horizon barely brightening. November 1996 marked 12 months since I'd been robbed of my soulmate, my anchor, and the ache, which had settled into a steady yet tolerable drone at the edge of my consciousness, surged back with full intensity that day. I passed the morning at the burial ground, perched beside his modest yet graceful marker, whispering softly to the partner who still haunted my sleep nightly. I shared updates on Mike, the care facility, my recent role, the overwhelming isolation that gripped me amid crowds, and the perpetual dread of what lay ahead. "How will I manage without you, Felipe?" I whispered, tracing the etched script on the stone. How can I raise our boy alone?" No reply was anticipated, yet in that hallowed hush of the graveyard beneath the overcast November clouds, a subtle peace stirred within. Not defeat, nor total surrender. I'd never wholly embraced the tragedy, the pointless savagery that snatched Felipe away from us, but perhaps an acknowledgement that, against all odds, I endured. Day by day, breath by breath, I persisted. And while I did, Mike would always have an ally battling for him, holding faith, and cherishing him without limits. That afternoon, I made my usual call on him. Unexpectedly, he struck me as remarkably sharp, as though the occasion's gravity touched him too. "It's been a year today, right?" he inquired as we settled in the home's courtyard. "Since Dad left us." I dipped my head, words failing me then. "I miss him," Mike went on, gaze locked on the blooms dancing lightly in the wind. Not the version from my hallucinations sometimes, but the true one. The guy who tossed the ball around with me outside, who guided me through equations, who stuck by me no matter what, even as my troubles began. The tears I'd restrained at the gravesite now trickled down my face without a sound. It marked the initial occasion in ages that Mike addressed Felipe so lucidly, separating the authentic parent from the phantom in his visions. "I bet he'd be incredibly proud of you," I at last replied, "of your resilience through everything, of your commitment to therapy." A wistful curve graced my boy's mouth. "Perhaps. Or he'd grieve over who I've turned into. Unwell in the head, confined here with nothing ahead." "No, stop that," I cut in, clasping his palms. "You've got prospects, Mike. Not the path we once pictured, sure, but real ones. And you've got me, forever." He gripped my hands in return, such a basic act, yet profoundly touching right then. For a fleeting, invaluable moment, we were simply a mother and her son, enduring shared hardships while leaning on one another for strength. Not some outsider checking in on a mental health case, not a confused youth grappling to separate what's real from what's imagined. Simply us, bound by blood, what fragments remained of the household we'd once known. Time slipped by, months morphing into years. 1997 faded into 1998, followed by 1999. Mike stayed on at the recovery facility, his progress fluctuating through good spells and rough patches. There were stretches of remarkable steadiness when he'd engage fully in group sessions, build bonds with fellow patients, and even express curiosity about picking up his education again. Then came the breakdowns, certain ones so acute they demanded short stays in specialized wards for closer care. I pressed on with my daily grind, my role at the health center, which evolved into a steadier office job, along with regular trips to see Mike and tending to the modest flat that never quite felt like my own space. A life marked by routine yet hollow, shaped more by what's missing than what's there. As the new century dawned, breakthroughs emerged in schizophrenia care, advanced drugs with reduced drawbacks, fresh counseling methods, and deeper insights into the condition's workings and more compassionate, practical ways to handle it. At 22, Mike started reaping the rewards of these advances. Bit by bit, thanks to the updated regimen, his episodes grew rarer and milder. The figure in the hat that had plagued him for so long showed up less frequently, fading to a faint shadow, more like a remote murmur than an overpowering command. Then, in 2001, an unforeseen shift occurred. The facility launched a gradual return to society initiative. Those showing reliability could venture out for several days, weekly in supervised home settings, to ease back into everyday existence. Mike made the initial shortlist. "He's prepared," affirmed his long-term doctor, Dr. Williams, who'd tracked his journey for years. "Support remains essential. Tough periods will persist. A stable setup is still vital, yet he stands to gain from extra hours in familiar surroundings, greater independence, and steadier ties to the broader community." Orosatsis' words can't capture the swirl of feelings inside me. Elation and optimism mingled with a gripping dread. Suppose a major episode struck under my watch. What if household stresses proved overwhelming? What if I failed to shield him, echoing that horrific evening with the pocket knife from long ago? Overriding it all, though, burned the profound longing to reclaim my boy, if only in pieces, under watchful terms, to fix him morning meals, unwind with evening shows, forge fresh recollections unbound by the facility's confines. Thus, come September 2001, Mike started weekend stays with us. From Friday evening through Sunday midday, a staff member from the center would drop him off and collect him later, making sure the shift went smoothly, doses were followed properly, and early warnings of instability were caught. Those days were treasures, even amid the hurdles. Mike endured flashes of withdrawal, still chatted with unseen companions now and then, and craved strict schedules plus serene settings. Yet there surfaced instances of striking ordinariness, such as joint meal prep, chats about a shared read, or quiet hours on the veranda overlooking the urban sprawl in easy companionship. "Thanks for sticking with me, Mom," he murmured one such evening, his tone barely audible. "I get how tough it's been." "I'd never quit on you," I answered, voice choked with held-back tears. "Not ever." The setup proved solid enough to broaden by 2003. Now Mike claimed 4 days weekly at the apartment, heading back to the center solely Monday through Wednesday for focused sessions and tweaks to his meds as needed. It felt nearly like his return, like piecing together a semblance of the home life I'd assumed gone for good. Flawless. Hardly. Setbacks hit, with times he'd barricade in his space, skipping meals and conversation, or when his eyes would drift far off once more, speech turning robotic. Boundaries loomed large on outings, destinations, and social circles. The illness lingered as an unyielding force in our world, setting boundaries and hurdles. Still, we shared space. We battled on, one day at a time, season after season, and amid the endless struggle, we uncovered small delights and modest triumphs. By 2005, 10 years post Mike's first diagnosis and 7 since Felipe's killing, I granted myself an emotion I'd shied from all those years: optimism. Not the foolish sort dreaming of instant healing or a full rollback to pre-disease days, but a grounded, seasoned optimism for a life of respect, with meaning and flashes of true contentment amid the constraints. Limitations set by his illness. Mike, at 27 years old, had developed a passion that evolved into something like a calling: art. He found in painting a means of expression that appeared to sidestep the obstacles of his splintered thoughts. His abstract works, vibrant with intense hues, frequently unsettling yet irresistibly compelling, started drawing notice not only from the facility's counselors, but also from guests and fellow experts. A modest show was arranged at the local arts venue. Titled Extraordinary Minds, it showcased pieces from mental health patients across different facilities in Dallas. Mike's canvases occupied a full wall, distinguished by their unexpectedly polished execution, unique tonal choices, and the vivid vitality they projected. I attended the debut evening, observing from afar as my boy, clad in a crisp shirt I'd purchased just for the event, chatted with attendees, described his artistic approach, and accepted praise with a blend of timidity and satisfaction. In moments, he blended seamlessly with any aspiring young creator. No outward clues hinted at the illness eroding him from within. Nothing indicated the everyday struggles he endured to remain anchored in the present. That evening, during the cab ride back to the facility alongside the support staff who oversaw the outing, I finally let the tears flow. These weren't the sorrowful or hopeless ones I'd wept so often through the years, but ones born of such profound pride that they caused a sharp ache in my heart. My child, defying every obstacle, had discovered a means of expression, a bridge to others, a method to shape the turmoil in his head into something concrete, something lovely, something that resonated with strangers. The disorder hadn't fully triumphed over him. Certain realms remained where he could thrive and authentically embody himself, and I, who had long viewed myself merely as a caretaker, a pillar, a buffer against falls, now embraced a fresh identity. That of an elated parent honoring her son's successes, regardless of how they diverged from my earlier visions for him. Existence would persist in its hardships, undoubtedly. Further episodes, more hospital stays, and additional bouts of hopelessness lay ahead. Schizophrenia doesn't vanish outright, no matter the optimal care provided, and Felipe's void, that enduring wound etched into my being like an indelible mark, would continue to sting during each birthday, every holiday season, every milestone he couldn't join. Yet perhaps, just perhaps, there existed space for more than mere endurance. Perhaps opportunities arose for modest delights, for direction, for significance, amid the wreckage of our former existence. It was this notion, not wholly optimistic, yet far from utterly bleak, that sustained me, day by day, year by year, alongside my son, confronting the hardships a harsh fate had thrust upon us, unearthing splendor wherever possible, forging purpose from disorder, and denying sorrow the final say in our narrative. In October 2008, my path veered in yet another unforeseen direction. Mike, then 30, had reached a steadiness that permitted a nearly ordinary rhythm. He stayed home 5 days weekly, heading back to the support home solely for check-ins and group sessions. His meds were finely tuned. Outbursts were infrequent, and he sporadically sold paintings via a gallery focused on outsider art from those with mental health challenges. At 55, I continued at the medical office, now handling administrative duties. It was an unadorned routine, lacking grand thrills, but secure at last. After endless tempests, we'd seemingly docked in calm waters. That Monday, as I prepared to head out, I tumbled on the bath rug. A foolish mishap, the sort that typically yields only a welt and an anecdote, but right away I sensed trouble. A burning agony in my right ankle and rapid puffiness. "Mom, you all right?" Mike rapped on the door, concern in his tone. I caught a sound. "I fell, honey," I answered, striving for composure beyond my unease. "Believe I've twisted my ankle." He assisted me from the bath and steadied me to the mattress. With remarkable focus, he inspected my foot, his slender hands gently probing the budding bulge. "We should head to the ER," he concluded, startling me with his sharpness and decisiveness. "Could be fractured." And indeed, it was a break in the lateral malleolus, the physician-confirmed post-X-ray review. No operation needed, but 6 weeks in plaster, then rehab, with strict bed rest initially. "Do you reside by yourself, madam?" inquired the doctor, a youthful fellow with pronounced shadows beneath his eyes, who had just wrapped up a grueling double shift. "No," I answered, glancing over at Mike, who sat silently in the seat next to mine. "I share my home with my son." The physician shot a brief look toward Mike, maybe picking up on certain cues. The steady jiggle of his knee, the way his eyes sometimes wandered to a blank corner of the space, the subtle motion of his mouth as if holding hushed talks. Physicians tend to spot those details. "Is there another person who could assist you during these initial days?" he pressed, his voice carrying a hint of skepticism regarding Mike's capacity to look after me. "I have acquaintances," I fibbed. Truth was, I had none left. Decades of tending to a son with schizophrenia had whittled my network down to nearly zero. Plus, I could bring in outside support if necessary. The doctor inclined his head, though he didn't seem fully persuaded. "I urge you to arrange some assistance for those early days. At minimum, you won't bear any pressure on that ankle. You'll require aid for everyday chores like washing up and fixing food." We departed the medical center with my leg encased in plaster, a script for analgesics, and a pamphlet outlining cast maintenance tips. Mike gripped my elbow steadily as I hobbled along on the awkward supports, steering me toward the cab that would carry us back. "I'll look after you, Mom," he vowed while the vehicle navigated Dallas's roadways. It wasn't the assurance from a grown child to his aging parent, but more akin to a kid eager to prove he could shoulder a burden beyond his strength. "Thanks, sweetheart," I murmured, my voice catching with a blend of appreciation and unease. Just how much could he handle? How long might his illness permit him to step into the caretaker position after all those years when he'd been the one requiring support? Those opening days passed more smoothly than expected. Mike proved vigilant, committed, and nearly precise in adhering to the medical advice. He assisted me to the lavatory, whipped up basic dishes, and diligently tracked my pill schedules. I contacted my employer, outlined the incident, and secured a 3-week sick leave. Dr. Williams, Mike's mental health specialist, stopped by our place upon hearing of the mishap, a rare kindness that highlighted the deep connection she'd built with our family through the years. "How are you both holding up?" she inquired following her check of my injury and nod to our routine. "Better than I imagined," I admitted. "Mike's been outstanding. He almost seems like a different person these past few days." She offered a grin, yet her gaze held a clinician's wariness I couldn't ignore. "That's positive, but let's stay alert," she whispered as Mike busied himself in the galley brewing our drinks. Switching from receiver of care to provider can weigh heavily on him, regardless of current appearances, and tension ranks among the top catalysts for setbacks in schizophrenia. "What would you advise?" I queried, sensing that old squeeze in my ribcage that always surfaced during talks of possible breakdowns. "I'll bump our meetings to bi-weekly, right here to simplify things, and I highly recommend exploring external aid, a caregiver for a couple hours daily, perhaps not just for your sake, but to ease the load on Mike." I agreed to mull it over, despite knowing our budget was strained. Coverage would handle some rehab costs, but hiring help privately felt like an extravagance we could scarcely manage. By the second week in the boot, Mike's demeanor began to shift, minor at the outset, a lapse in memory now and then, a touch of impatience elsewhere. Nothing dire, merely exhaustion markers, I figured. Who wouldn't wear out from round-the-clock tending? It was that Thursday when a more troubling indicator emerged. I roused in the wee hours, parched, and summoned Mike for a glass. Silence greeted me. Gripping the aids, I edged to his door and spotted him in the shadowed den, deeply engaged in dialogue with an invisible figure. "But you're missing the point," he insisted, waving toward the vacant couch. "She relies on me these days. I can't simply—" He cut off sharply upon sensing me there. Swiveling quickly, his stare dilated, catching the faint glow from outside. "Mom," he uttered, tone oddly steady like the episode hadn't occurred. "What do you require?" "A sip of water, that's all," I said, feigning ignorance of the scene. Living alongside the disorder had schooled me in choosing battles, push or play along. "Sorry for disturbing you." He rose promptly and headed to fetch it. I observed his actions, scanning for further unraveling. His fingers shook, his gait faltered, his stance rigid. Outwardly fine, yet I recognized schizophrenia's illusions. Serene surfaces often masked brewing tempests. Over the ensuing days, the incidents grew more common and harder to overlook. Mike started lingering for extended stretches in the bathroom, murmuring to himself while the tap gushed to mask the noise. He'd overlook basic duties such as administering my pills or fixing dinner. One evening, around 3:00 a.m., I discovered him in the kitchen with every cupboard flung wide and plates strewn across the tiles. "I'm hunting for the cameras," he clarified when I inquired about his actions. "They're monitoring us, Mom. They need to check if I'm looking after you properly." The following day, I reached out to Dr. Williams. She tweaked Mike's prescription, ramped up the therapy appointments further, and stressed the urgency of bringing in external support. "This isn't optional anymore, Helen," she stated with her usual soft resolve. "It's essential for his health. Mike's starting to unravel from the stress. We must ease that load before it spirals into a major breakdown." At last, I relented. I dipped into the emergency fund I'd tucked away for tough times. Fittingly, money I'd imagined would cover one of Mike's episodes, not to bring in aid for my own needs, and brought on a licensed caregiver for 4 hours daily. Sylvia turned out to be a sturdy woman in her 40s, with roughened palms and a warm grin. Her background in handling mental health cases proved invaluable for us. Beyond tending to me, handling washes, bandage swaps, and light routines to ward off muscle wasting, she could manage Mike during his rough patches, too. "All good here, hun?" she'd ask upon spotting him chatting with his delusions. "Care to share what's on your mind today?" To my astonishment, he'd frequently open up to her, as if her outsider status, free from the heavy ties of our family bond, offered him a secure outlet to voice his anxieties and bewilderment. "The guy in the hat showed up again," he revealed one afternoon as Sylvia redid my bandages. "He claims I'm failing Mom, that she'll pass away on my watch, just like Dad did." It pierced my heart to hear that. Even after all this time, Mike harbored the blame for Felipe's passing. Deep down, he still thought he might have averted the disaster. Sylvia stayed unflappable. "Do you buy into what he says?" She probed lightly, like they were chatting about the forecast. "At times," he conceded at length, "especially when exhaustion hits hard." "I reckon that hat-wearing fellow hasn't a clue," Sylvia responded while securing the wrap with a soft tap on my calf. "In all my years visiting households, I've yet to witness a son caring for his mom with such devotion as yours." I noticed a shift in Mike's expression right then, a easing, a fading of the strain that had mounted over recent days, merely a handful of straightforward, unbiased phrases from a person he wasn't obligated to shield on an emotional level. That's when it hit me. Our parent-child bond, for all its warmth, was contributing to the issue. Mike shouldered not just my bodily needs, but my feelings as well. He labored to conceal his turmoil, the whispers in his head, and his dreads to spare me concern, which only amplified the turmoil inside him. Introducing Sylvia acted like a pressure release, injecting an external element into our insular setup that let pent-up stress dissipate. Over the ensuing weeks, bolstered by her 4-hour daily assistance and Dr. Williams' regular check-ins, we forged a tentative yet workable equilibrium. My leg mended steadily. 6 weeks later, the plaster came off, exposing flaky, pallid flesh and a noticeably slimmer appendage from disuse. I began rehab sessions thrice weekly, relying on a specialized ride from the local welfare program for those with limited movement. Each incremental advance, the initial unaided stride, the first solo shower, the return to my job on a reduced schedule, seemed to lift Mike a bit too, as though my bodily healing intertwined with his psychological steadiness. We kept Sylvia on board long past my main recuperation, scaling back to 2 hours, 3 days weekly. A brief respite granting Mike some personal space, a pause from the unending duty he perceived toward me. It was on one such afternoon nearly 4 months post-accident that an unexpected turn unfolded. I'd wrapped up therapy ahead of schedule. The specialist faced a sudden issue and cut things short. I eased the door open quietly, wary of disturbing if Mike was deep in one of his art phases, which demanded total focus. The lounge stood vacant, yet murmurs drifted from the kitchen. I edged closer, steadying myself on the walking stick that had supplanted my supports, and overheard, and then she remarked, "My artwork felt raw and purging." Mike's tone carried an energy I seldom encountered. I'm not entirely certain what that implies, but by the tone in her words made it clear she meant it as praise. Naturally, it was praise. Sylvia's voice echoed back, accompanied by the clatter of plates being moved. "That blue artwork you shared with me really sends shivers down your spine. The feelings practically leap from the surface." I paused at the threshold, observing quietly without drawing attention. Mike and Sylvia stood together by the kitchen island, mixing up what looked like batter. Flour dusted his cheeks, while she had a kitchen cloth draped across her shoulder. They appeared utterly ordinary, like close companions, whipping up a meal, chatting and chuckling over creativity and everyday existence. "Do you believe I might get my own show someday?" Mike wondered, his tone turning timid and exposed. "Not those therapy displays for folks in treatment, but a proper one in an everyday venue." "Why on earth not?" Sylvia shot back, playfully elbowing him. "You've got skill in abundance. And hey, my nephew's employed at a modest gallery up in the Heights area. I could reach out to him. Maybe he'll swing by to check out your pieces." Mike's expression brightened with an innocence so raw and true that it brought moisture to my eyes. I retreated softly, planning to loop around and enter with more fuss, signaling my presence loudly. That instant felt too sacred to disrupt, the rare, straightforward bond my boy seldom forged with anyone beyond his doctors and counselors. Over the ensuing months, Sylvia evolved beyond her role as aide. She turned into a true companion, nearly woven into our household. Her nephew, Leonardo, did visit to view Mike's creations and found them compelling enough to arrange a modest display at his workplace. He described the pieces as modern pieces inspired by the Southwest, steering clear of any reference to Mike's diagnosis, just artwork evaluated for its inherent worth. The debut happened in July 2009, on a crisp evening in Dallas, an understated gathering with inexpensive vino and basic nibbles. Yet to our family, it rivaled the grandest celebration imaginable. Mike, anxious yet resolute, donned the azure shirt that once belonged to Felipe, treasured over the years. I slipped into a fresh outfit, my first purchase in ages, and even indulged in a salon visit. Entering the space and spotting Mike's works displayed on pristine walls, illuminated by focused lights, bearing his complete name and self-picked titles, marked an irreversible shift in our relationship. We transcended the image of the hovering parent and the ailing child. Now we stood as Helen and Michael Lopez, an accomplished woman alongside an emerging creator. That evening, 3 pieces found buyers, including one snagged by an instructor from the University of Texas at Dallas, unaware that the talent behind the canvas navigated life with schizophrenia. "His pieces carry a surreal vibe," he remarked to Mike, who hung on every word, fingers quivering from the blend of thrill and jitters. "There's a subtle detachment echoing Magritte, yet laced with a bolder, nearly delirious color scheme. Truly captivating." I saw my son swell with that feedback, his posture straightening in a swell of authentic self-worth, free from any inflated fantasies and rooted in real acknowledgement of his gifts. Riding back in the cab to the group home, escorted by the event support staff, Mike stayed quiet for a stretch, gazing at the urban glow dancing across his contemplative features. "Mom," he murmured at last, his words steady despite their softness, "I reckon Dad would have loved this evening." I forced down the tightness in my chest before replying. "He definitely would have, honey, no doubt about it." It became a pivotal shift for us. What started as a seemingly trivial mishap, piled onto the heavier losses we'd endured, ultimately proved a hidden gift. A side path that unveiled vistas we might never have explored. Through his artwork, my son not only uncovered a channel for his inner world, but also a mission and a sense of self apart from his struggles. I discovered the strength to ease my grip slightly, to believe the world could occasionally show kindness, and that individuals like Sylvia and Leonardo truly existed, peering past clinical tags. Of course, schizophrenia lingered. Rough patches persisted, sporadic episodes, tweaks to meds. The fellow in the hat resurfaced during peaks of tension, but the weight felt shared now, not solely between us, but within a budding circle of allies that formed naturally. Sylvia, Leonardo, fellow creators from the gallery, and a creative therapy circle Mike began joining. These days, settled in this glider chair, surveying my den's walls adorned with my child's artworks, some he urged me to hold on to, others I acquired from his shows, beaming like any parent. I reflect on life's capricious paths. That slip in the restroom, which at first loomed as another small disaster amid our string of profound sorrows, what turned out to be a hidden gift in disguise became a roundabout path that opened up worlds we couldn't have stumbled upon any other way. At 47 years old today, Mike continues to navigate life with schizophrenia, dealing with his ongoing challenges and requiring a bit of guidance and assistance, yet he's gained respect as an artist within niche communities. He occasionally delivers presentations on creativity and psychological well-being. He maintains a close-knit group of companions and leads an existence that felt utterly out of reach during those grim early periods of diagnosis, hospital stays, and intense episodes. Now, at 72, I'm opening up about all this with you. Perhaps to offer encouragement to fellow parents grappling with a child's tough mental health verdict. Perhaps to illustrate that tales from households touched by profound psychiatric struggles don't inevitably conclude in despair, or simply because, after decades of holding this narrative close, the moment has arrived to release it, reshaping it into a resource that might aid someone else in some small measure. If you've stuck with me to this point, my friend, I extend my deepest gratitude. I realize this hasn't been a light tale to absorb, but I trust it sparked something meaningful for you, maybe a connection to your personal path, no matter its shape. As I wrap up, could I request one quick thing? If these words moved you at all, hit that like button. Join the Voices of May channel to catch our upcoming personal accounts, and drop a note in the comments about which region of the country you're tuning in from. This senior lady offers you a warm embrace, brimming with affection. And keep in mind, however pitch black the darkness gets, dawn invariably breaks.